Good evening. Good evening, everyone. My apologies for the slight delay, but I'm Rick Powell, the president of Wilshire Boulevard Temple. We're thrilled you're here tonight, but for security reasons, we're a little slow getting people checked in, which I know each and every one of you can appreciate. First, let me wish all of you a very happy and, most importantly, a healthy new year. I'd like to have our current trustees, our past trustees, and our past presidents at this time please stand up. That would be you, Howard. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm excited about this new year and all the wonderful things that this temple will be doing for our members and for our community, as you see this evening. We are continuing to grow, and we want to deepen our purpose in our community. We want Wilshire Boulevard Temple to be a welcoming hand to you by offering a variety of services, counseling, and support. You are a part of our large family, and we embrace each and every one of you. May our helping hand always be extended to anyone in need. That is the great message that this temple, Wilshire Boulevard Temple, brings to each and every one of you. As members, we each have a responsibility to ourselves and each other. We are so grateful to all of you for your continued support and commitment to helping us grow and be more effective each and every day. Tonight is just one example of the diversity of experiences we bring to our members and friends. You are truly in for a treat tonight. So without further ado, let me introduce our Director of Adult Programs, Rabbi Susan Nannis.
Thank you and welcome everyone. Speaking of community, I must acknowledge a few of our amazing partners for this evening's program. First of all, we are in partnership with the USC Kasdan Institute and the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. And this entire program is sponsored by the Jerome N. Tober Fund, and Mrs. Ruth Tober is here in the front row, and we'd like to thank her. Newsweek called him the most influential rabbi in America. The Jerusalem Post named him one of the 50 most influential Jews in the world. He is a scholar and the author of 8 books. He is an educator, having taught at the Jewish Theological Seminary, American Jewish University, Hunter College, and UCLA. His columns have been published by numerous newspapers and websites, including the New York Times, the LA Times, and the Washington Post. He has appeared on the Today Show, Face the Nation, ABC This Morning, CBS This Morning, PBS, A&E, the History Channel, and the Discovery Channel. He is the senior rabbi of our sister congregation, Sinai Temple. He is our colleague and our friend, and tonight we are honored to have him in conversation with our guest speaker. Please welcome Rabbi David Wolpe. Bernard-Henri Lévy is so well known to the French that they call him by his initials, BHL. Dashing, charismatic, as celebrated as any rock star, he is a unique figure which has no equal in the United States. An action-driven moralist, an international thought leader who moves fast, writes fast, and is listened to with respect. Recently, I heard someone call him the Mick Jagger of intellectuals. For over 30 years, he has been a philosopher, publisher, author of more than 30 books, including Barbarism with the Human Face and Who Killed Daniel Pearl. He is a playwright, journalist, filmmaker, defender of causes across the globe, co-founding the anti-racist group SOS Racism. Known as a provocateur, he has challenged and counseled world leaders and served on diplomatic missions for the French government. He has been called a tribal sage, a visionary, and perhaps a prophet, speaking out in defense of Israel and against the return of anti-Semitism. Also named one of the 50 most important Jews in the world, and the most important intellectual in France, Monsieur Lévy has now turned his thoughts to his Jewish heritage, to our Jewish heritage, in his new book, The Genius of Judaism, in which he explains how his ideas are shaped by the wisdom and beauty of Judaism, why Judaism and Jewish peoplehood are so important to the world, and why the global resurgence of anti-Semitism poses an existential threat to us all. After this program, we will have time for questions, as well as book sales and signing. But for now, please welcome Bernard-Henri Lévy.
I want to begin by just addressing two comments to those of you who are gathered here. The first is that because we're being taped by C-SPAN, it's very important that you laugh at the appropriate places. And also, we have asked our guest if, instead of addressing his answers to me, which is the natural thing to do, to look out at you because of the C-SPAN cameras. So the second is that I'm going to try to be as explicit and careful as I can in my questions, because even though, as you will hear, our guest speaks magnificent English, nonetheless, I think to conduct an interview in one's second or third language is not an easy endeavor. And so I hope that you will be patient with both of us as we try to explore this quite remarkable book, The Genius of Judaism. And I want to begin by asking you the following, which is, obviously, you are more than familiar with the work of one of your French philosophical predecessors, Jean-Paul Sartre, and you know his book, Anti-Semite and Jew. That book was criticized because it suggested in some ways that the anti-Semite gets to decide what the Jew is, that you're defined by outside forces instead of by yourself. And so I wonder why you chose to begin a book about the genius of Judaism by talking about anti-Semitism instead of talking about Judaism itself.
It is the best question to start with. Let me say first of all how happy I am to be here. I said it just before to a little group of us. For me to be hosted in this place, in this Wilshire temple, is more than a joy. It is a great honor, and it was a dream of my life. To be here, to be received here, and to have the honor to speak in this place, which is such a denial of the stupid theory of the opposition between Jewishness and art, between Jewishness and images, which is such a more complicated thing than what say some of our enemies. It's such a treat, such a joy, such an honor to be here, and even more with Rabbi David Wolpe, who is in America, in Anglo-Saxon world in general, a legend. And I am really honored to be here on this stage, sharing it with Rabbi Wolpe. To reply to his question, it is the question which I ask myself when I began the writing of this book. It is true that the Jew has not come in this world to discuss anti-Semitism. It is true that anti-Semitism is more than anything else boring. It is true that when I reply on the TV to the question of the rise of anti-Semitism, I have the feeling to lose a few minutes of my life. It is true that to enter in the psychology of an anti-Semite, to try to understand his reasons, is something completely absurd and disgusting. And by the way, it is not what I do in this book. The chapter about anti-Semitism, which is the first chapter of the book, is not devoted to that at all. I don't try to enter in the reasons of the malin, of the evil. I try to say, because anti-Semitism is in progress, because it is proceeding on every front, and not only in Europe, also in America, I could not start this book without mentioning it, and without saying how I conceive the resistance of it. Not how to convince the anti-Semites, I will not convince them. Not how to understand them, I don't care about them. They are, most of them, illiterate, stupid people. Not even the sort, if I compare in France, the anti-Semites of today and those of the 30s, there is such an abyss between them. In the 30s, alas, for my grandfathers, anti-Semitism could brag to have some great writers bearing the flag. Louis-Ferdinand Céline was not a zero, far from it. Drieux-La Rochelle was a good writer. Paul Morand was a great writer, of course. Today, there is nothing. Really rednecks of the thoughts. Really stupid, non-thinking women and men. So I don't, the chapter about anti-Semitism is not devoted to that. It is devoted to reply to the question how to contain, how to resist, and how to win and prevail about the anti-Semites. How to be stronger than them. The only questions which the anti-Semitism addresses to me, to you, Rabbi, and to all of you, is how to do in order to be stronger than them. We are not going to cure them. We are not going to understand them. We are not going to convince. We just have to be stronger. And in these pages of the beginning of the book, I try, strong of my experience, strong of what Rabbi Wolpe just said, this very bad season, this very bad age in the history of Jewry, which was opened by Sartre. This idea of Jean-Paul Sartre, that I was a Jew only because a non-Jew saw me as a Jew, was a horrible idea, was a minorizing idea, it consisted in transforming the Jew in nearly nothing, a shadow, an effect of the look of the other. So my idea in this chapter is to try, in my modest way, I'm not at all a prophet, I'm a little Jew. I am a little Jew trying to know more, trying to get into the secrecy, the mystery, and the greatness of Judaism. But the little Jew who I am has a little experience and a little knowledge about how to be strong enough to be stronger than them. This is what I try to say in this chapter.
So, understanding that we suffer from a low quality of anti-Semite these days, in fact, what you do here is incredibly important, and I found it helpful, and I don't doubt that you will too, which is that you try to address the best arguments of anti-Semitism. and talk about why they're fallacious. So, for example, you don't address Holocaust denial, which is stupid, but you do address why the Holocaust can't be compared in some ways to any other tragedy in history. Would you tell us something about that? What makes it different, and what should we know, because the analytical power of that is very potent?
Yes, this question is very important because one of the pillars of the new anti-Semitism is the Holocaust denying. It is one of the pillars. There is a way to say the Jews are horrible beings because they traffic, exaggerate, or invent what should be the most sacred thing for them, which is the memory of their martyrs. This is how the denial of Holocaust turns into anti-Semitism. It depicts a portrait of the Jew capable, able to the worst, which is making up and the most saint memory which he had. So the question is really, I try faithfully and thoroughly to raise the question of what is, at the end of the day, the unicity of Holocaust. Why is the Holocaust a massacre unprecedented until now without any real following? Why is it so special? It is not a question of number of deaths. It is not a question of planification, as it is sometimes said. There are some genocides which have been planified. It is not the speed or the rhythm of the massacre. The genocide in Rwanda has probably the world record of the speed of the massacre. It is not, I take the few generally said reasons of this unicity, and I reach the conclusion that there is two things which make the genocide of the Jews, the Holocaust, absolutely unique. Two. Number one, the Holocaust made the world, the entire world, a trap for all the Jews. Entire world. For a Cambodian, or for a man of Rwanda, or even for an Armenian, there was some possibilities of exit. If he could, which was practically very difficult, but in theory, if a Cambodian could escape to Vietnam, if an Armenian could escape from the desert of Syria, he was safe. For the Jews, there was no safe place in the world. The project of the Hitlerians was to eradicate, to kill the Jews wherever they could be. And the theoretical project was, again, to make the entire world a trap for the Jewish prey, considered as a prey. So, no recourse. And the second specificity, mathematical. It is not a creed, what I say, it's a fact. That it is the only genocide which has been supposed to be, which was supposed to be without rest, without any piece of the body remaining safe. All the other genocides, as cruel as they could be, had, I would not say a limit, but in some cases, the perpetrators of the genocide decided to spare the old people. In other cases, they decided to spare the children. In other cases, they did not care about the books. They did not care about the memory. They did not care about the dead, for example. The Holocaust is the first genocide in the history of genocide, which was a total project of destruction. Nothing had to be left. No human living body, no human dead body, and not even this other living body, which is the letter, the word of the book, which had to be erased also. So, no place remaining in the world, no member of these people having to remain alive. These are the two specificities of this genocide. And this is what entitles the scholars of the Holocaust without any satisfaction. Of course, it would be so better if it was not the case, but it is that which entitles the scholars of the Holocaust to say that it is as a sort of standard of inhumanity, that it is a sort of climax of the evil which the man can do to the other man. And what I say also in this chapter is that far from discouraging the world to take care of the other massacres, far from consisting in a sort of a monopoly of the suffering, this way of thinking the Holocaust as an absolutely special massacre is an invitation to be aware, to get the first signs, and to be able to resist to any other massacre or outrage to humanity. I show in the book, and again, it is not a creed, it's a fact, that since I am in the age of involve myself and to see and to think, each time in our history, since 50 years, each time that the smell of genocide has come back, each time that a huge massacre has begun, those who gave the alert, those who went on the breach and on the rampart first were always not the Jews, but those who had in their heart, in their memory and in their intelligence, this idea of the specificity of the Holocaust. It was that in Bangladesh in the 70s. It was that in Bosnia-Herzegovina. It was the case in Darfur. It was the case in Rwanda. This perception of the specificity of the Holocaust gives to those who take it seriously a sort of sixth sense, a sort of radar of inhumanity, which makes that they are always the first to feel, to know, and to fight. And this is very important because one of the arguments of the new anti-Semitism is to say that if you give too much to the Jews, you will have nothing left to for the Rwanda. One of the major arguments is that there is no enough space in the human heart to have sorrow for the Jews and for the Darfuri. It is the opposite. It is when your heart has a real and clear knowledge of what happened really to the Jews, that, by experience, I know that you are immediately aware and immediately on the bridge for the other massacres and genocides.
That is it's a wonderful prelude to what I want to ask you next. It also reminds me of the writer Cynthia Ozick, who has a beautiful image. She said that the shofar has a narrow end and a broad end. But if you start off by blowing in the broad end, you get nothing. If you start off by blowing in the narrow end, you get a sound everyone can hear. And what I want to ask you is, what made you, do you think, your Jewish legacy, your understanding of the Holocaust, what made you continually throughout your life go to places where people were in danger, and thereby also endanger yourself, since you could have lived a very comfortable and renowned life without traveling to all the places, only some of which you recount in here, and making common cause with people in danger?
There are probably many reasons for that, and probably some intimate reasons, some family motives. I don't know if I have to enter in that here, but in one word, I come from in France. There is a real strong dividing line between those who accepted fascism and those who refused fascism. And this is one of the reasons, by the way, why I love so much and I admire so much America, because America was, at the end of the day, the fatherland, physical and spiritual, of those who in my country refused fascism. It happens that my father was one of these young heroes who, when he was 17 years old, decided to enlist himself and to commit himself to the physical fight against fascism. He did it in the Spanish Republic against Franco in the International Brigade, and then he did it in the Free Army of France. He was one of the most decorated heroes of the Battle of Monte Cassino. He had the terrible job which fascinated me all my life, and especially when I was a child and a teenager. His job in Monte Cassino was to be a volunteer to go beyond the lines, to take under the fire of the enemy, to take his comrades, his companions who were wounded. This is the most difficult task in a battle, to go under fire, beyond the lines, to take your friends who are heavily wounded. So this is why was my father. I suppose that in the back of my mind, all my life, I had, as any of us, as any little Jew who is devoted to his father, who loves his father, I suppose that I had that in the back of my mind. I suppose that I had the will to try to be worth of the message, of the heritage, and of the glory of my father. This is the intimate reason. After that, there are, of course, other reasons, more intellectual. And they relate to what we just said. They relate to my way of being a Jew in two regards. Number one, what I said about Holocaust. Again, someone who has in his heart and in his intelligence, and better at the junction of the two, this burning wound of the memory of Holocaust, cannot be indifferent to what can happen in the various places I just quoted and in which I went. And exactly as when I heard about the martyrdom of the American young Jewish reporter Daniel Pearl, I received it as a physical shock, as an absolute obligation to commit myself, to go on his footsteps, to honor and celebrate his name, if I dare say, my dear Rabbi, exactly as I did for Daniel Pearl, who was a name, of course. I did the same for so many unnumbered dead, unnamed deads, without any grave dead all over the world. And this idea of a bunch of women and men dead in packs, dead without grave, without name, without number, and without memory, without archives, without leaving a trace in the memory of mankind, it is true that this idea has made me all my life crazy and ill. And I devoted a little part of my time, not enough, to try to give back a name, to give back a trace, to just figure the proper number to these outnumbered deaths. This is one thing. Another thing is more deeply to what is properly Judaism, more accurately related to what I call the genius of Judaism. For me, to be a Jew means, in a way which I try to express in this book, to care about the other. The question of being a Jew, I often hear people ask me, what about your Jewish identity? I'm always embarrassed by this idea of identity, because I'm not so sure that Judaism is a matter of identity, which means to be the same of ourselves. The real challenge for a Jew, the real stake, the real work is the relation not with the ID, but with the other. And for me, the most challenging way to relate to the other is the way in which the most enigmatic prophet in my eyes, Jonah, acts. Jonah, when he goes to Nineveh, he goes to the biggest otherness. He goes to the proper embodiment of the absolute otherness. And he deals with that, and he speaks to that. He tries to save that, this city of evil. For me, being a Jew means that all my life, at least all the part of my life where I felt deeply and affirmatively Jew, has consisted in fighting, in trying to be worth again, not of the memory of my father, but this time to be worth the inheritage, the message, the lesson of the prophet Jonah. I'm a little Jew faithful to the prophet Jonah, and this book is a praise to Jonah, is an attempt to unfold the lesson of Jonah. There is in this book, and I would probably say that it is the core of it, after so many commentaries, after Sforno, after Malbim, after all, an attempt to add a tiny drop of ink to the commentary of Jonah. My life has consisted in doing that, and this book, which is a summary of my life, is an attempt to express that.
Something I'd like to preface my next question with, which you may not know because most of you haven't yet had a chance to read the book, is that the same sense of depth and force that you hear in Bernard-Henri Lévy speaking actually comes through in the book as well. It is written in a sort of Vedic, prophetic style, and so you will have that experience when you read the book, just as I know you're grateful for having it being here this evening. And I think that the arc of our conversation has followed in some ways the arc of the book, which is beginning with anti-Semitism, opening into concern for the other, and the way in which Judaism, and especially Jonah, illustrates it. So let's stick with Jonah for a second. Those of you who remember the story, God tells Jonah to speak to the city of Nineveh, which is a hated city in ancient times and in Israel. And Jonah doesn't want to do it. He runs away. He gets swallowed by a fish. And eventually, the fish spits him up. He goes to Nineveh. I'm skipping a few parts, but that's the idea. And in fact, I remember many years ago hearing a comment from a wonderful rabbi in Israel who passed away a year or two ago, Rav Amiel, who said, why does Jonah get to be a prophet considering the fact that he ran away from God? And his answer is because Jonah, unlike the rest of us, only ran away from God once. And so that's what I want to ask you is, does the Jewish tradition, does part of the genius of Judaism that you speak about here mandate that belief in God, and especially in the teaching of your teacher Levinas, that being in God's presence is less theological and belief than it is sort of anthropological and living life the way that you spoke about the best moments of your life and your father's life? That is, it's about the other as opposed to about the one.
Levinas said it in another way. Levinas said that Judaism was more than an optic, it was a practice. Optic meaning a look, optic, a look at the sky, and practice meaning a link with the others. Levinas used to say that. Levinas, who very often said that one of his concern was to get rid as much as possible of the religion. He said Judaism is not a religion. Paganism is a religion. Christianism is a religion. Idolatry is a religion. There is the religious spirit behind, under every little stone. The task, the target of the Jew is to reduce the quantity of religion in the world. Rosenzweig, Franz Rosenzweig, probably one of the most important German-speaking master of Judaism in the 20th century, wanted to stick in front of his little house of study, "I am irreligious." He said that to Alliot, his fellow student. The experience of so many great masters of Judaism is the experience not of the presence but of the retreat of God, the Tzimtzum. Rabbi Chaim of Volozhin, who is one of the inspirers I modestly follow in this book, has as his main philosophical experience this terrible test of the world becoming suddenly devoid of God, empty of God. And then, says Rabbi Chaim de Volozhin, then begins the question of what the man have to do. If the God retracts itself, if God quits in a way the world, if therefore there is a risk for the world which has been created to decreate itself. This is the most vertiginous hypothesis of Chaim of Volozhin, is the hypothesis of a possible decay, collapse, ruin of the world due to this tzimtzum of God. Then what do the men and women have to do? This is a real Jewish question according to him. His reply is that they have to pray toward an empty sky, and they have to study and to interpretate ad infinitum, endlessly, the holy text. And that it is their words which will be like the wooden charpent of the world, that the world will hold against this threat and imminence of disaster and collapse because of the study of the little Jews, which is all of us. So this for me is the crucial question. And I try to say at the end of the book, probably because I'm a secular Jew, probably because I am not familiar with the rituals who are so important in the Jewish life, probably. But my feeling is that one of the difference, let's say it this way, one of the difference between Christianity and Judaism is that for a Jew, the biggest requirement, what is required more than anything else from a Jew, is less to believe than to study and to understand. And to add an addition of intelligence to the world. A Christian believes, of course. A Christian has nothing more important than to jump in belief, to make the economy of all the steps, all the scales, which the Jews never avoid in the very work of the commentary. A Christian says, okay, let's forget all these details, all this labyrinth of comment. Let's jump to the bet. Blaise Pascal, the French great Pascal. There is a great beauty in this gesture to stop speaking, to stop thinking, just betting and jumping. My feeling is that a Jew does not jump. A Jew does not bet. A Jew never stops commenting, studying, adding a paradox to another paradox, and so on. And there is a great quote of Gaon of Vilnius, the Gaon of Vilnius, who was asked one day by one of his students, Rabbi Gaon, if you had to choose between, on one side, a lazy student who is never here in the shul, but who believes, and a hard worker student who abuses all the strength of his mind and sometimes of his body, who really dies on the work of the commentary, but who doubts, who would you choose? Gaon of Vilnius says that, of course, he would prefer not to have to choose. But if he had to, he would prefer the hard worker who devotes his life to the commentary and to revive and make more and more vibrant the letters of the text, but who doubts, than the lazy one who believes. And this, for me, is one of what I call in this book the genius of Judaism.
I'm now going to ask you a very pedestrian question that a rabbi would ask. The idea that Judaism is about argumentation and study and text and ideas and searching is a beautiful and wonderful and inspiring idea, and I don't think anybody here would object to it. But can Judaism survive if people don't know Hebrew, don't keep kosher, don't keep the Sabbath, don't do rituals which are specific to Judaism, whereas ethics is not? You can care about other people and be any religion or no religion, but nobody who prays in Hebrew isn't Jewish, or very, very few. So I wonder if, in an attempt to sort of grab the Empyrean, we're not losing something of the everydayness that also maintains places like this.
You are right.
That's enough. Okay.
No, it's not enough, because you are half right. The Jews have specifically a certain way of eating, of meeting, and of speaking. And the relationship to Hebrew, for example, is crucial. And when I say that I am a little Jew, I mean, between other things, that I am so disappointed at myself to be still so remote, so foreign to the language. But I don't agree to say that everyone takes care of the otherness. I don't think that this concern of the other is common to all monotheistic religions. At least, let's say it in another way. I do believe that there is a real Jewish way, very specific, comparable to nothing else, to live under the shadow of the other, or to put his own shadow on the other, and to comment the text. The Christian comment, of course. The Muslims comment sometimes, the Hadith and those who are faithful to that. But there is what being a Jew means also having a very special way of commenting. And I would just like to take one example, which is in the book, which is makes a few pages of the book. I will sum it in a few words. There is a great page of Rashi commenting a verse saying that the Torah has to be read as it had a face. And Rashi says that this verse means three things, which are very specific to Jews, which you will not find in any Christian commentator. Rashi says that to say that a verse has to be read as it has a face, number one means that the verse, the text, is a living body. It is never frozen. It is never dead. It has nothing to do with a dead letter which the Christian, for example, oppose to the vibrant spirit. The letter is living as itself. Letters are living beings. Number one. Number two, Rashi says this image of the face of the verse has to be taken even more seriously and literally. Literally. A face is a face, he says. A face is the face of the text, okay, but this is a metaphor. The face is the face of the reader. And this verse has to be understood in a way that does that the woman or the man who reads the verse finds his own face in the very process of the reading. To be a Jew means to believe that when you read a verse, when you commit yourself to the commentary of the Torah, you find your face. And you find your proper face. And you find, therefore, your proper subjectivity. The Jewish idea of being related to the text means that it is the best way to jump out of the rank of the animals, of the evildoers, all of the materials, and to become a real subject. This is a Jewish idea. And Rashi says a third thing. Rashi says that the verse has not to be read as if he had only one face, but he says that it has to be read as if he had, the verse, 70 faces. And Rashi wonders about this number of 70. Why has the verse to be read as if it had 70 faces? 70 is not 12. It is not the number of the tribes, it is the number of the nations. And Rashi says that the singularity, the specificity of the Jewish experience of the text and of a commentary is to address a convocation to all the nations of the world, to all the human beings, to find their true face in the face-to-face with the verse. So this way of relating yourself, you know that better than me, Rabbi Wolpe, but this way of reading a verse, this way of relating oneself to the text is a very special way. The Christian can say whatever they want, or the Muslims, they have their own beauty, they have their own highness, of course, but not this one. And this is as specific to Judaism as the use of the Hebrew, as the practice of the kashrut, and so on. It is a second pillar. And I I don't believe in a Judaism, I'm sorry, who would just be content, who would just be happy with living a Jewish life with the great rhythm of the Shabbat and of the saint days and feast, and leaving aside this great task of ordering, asking, escorting the nations to this finding of their own face in the discovery of the peace.
So before we take questions, and I'm going to take questions next, what you remind me of is that you say in this book that the great division is not between Orthodox and non-Orthodox or between left and right. It's between thinking Jews and non-thinking Jews. And I would like you to give your definition, if you would. There's a Hasidic story about Rabbi Simcha Bunim, who was walking with his students, and he pointed at some Hasidim and he said, "They're dead." And they said, "What do you mean they're dead?" He said, "They don't ask questions anymore." And they walked on for a minute, and one of his students said, "Rabbi, how do I know I'm not dead?" He goes, "Because you asked." So how do you make that division that Rabbi Simcha made between who's a thinking Jew and who's not a thinking Jew? And I'm asking that seriously without being at all facetious or funny, because maybe some of us are non-thinking Jews, but if we hear your encouragement to be thinking, we will rethink our non-thinkingness. I think.
No, this is, of course, the correct question. I'm so angry when I hear some lazy analysis about all of that. I am a secular Jew, and my relationship to the Jewish life you are evoking is, to be frank, very light. So I don't belong to the world of the men in black. I don't belong to this world. But I'm so cross, I'm so angry when I see them reduced to a sect of obscurantists frozen in their orthodoxy. This is just not fair. And I invite in the book, the Jews and those who want to be familiar with Jews to overcome this stupid division. Because what does it mean to be an Orthodox? Orthodox is a Greek word which means to believe that there is one orthodoxa, one right opinion. And this right opinion is right forever. It cannot be changed. It cannot be embittered. It is frozen in its rightness. I'm sorry, but my friends who are called Orthodox do exactly the opposite of that. When they are in their yeshiva, devoting again their days and their nights to try to go deeper in their doxas, in their opinion, they go exactly against this temptation of orthodoxy. They are the opposite. There is nobody less orthodox than those who are quoted or called orthodox. I remember my friend Bernard-Henri Lévy. Maybe, I'm sure the name is not very familiar here, but it has been an important name for me, and it is important in the French Jewishness. He was a former man of my generation. He was an extreme leftist revolutionary in the 60s. He was the chief of the French Maoists. He went in China to see not Mao Zedong, but nearly. He was the secretary of Jean-Paul Sartre. And he is the one who converted Jean-Paul Sartre, by the way. He converted Jean-Paul Sartre from this stupid idea of Jewishness being nothing else than the reflect of the eye of the other to the idea of an affirmative Jewishness. And Bernard-Henri Lévy, in the second part of his life, at the end of the most spectacular teshuvah of the history of the great Jewish scholars, became a man in black. He became a man in black. My dear friend, who was, as he often said, he was the inventor of the Palestinians. I remember when we had a discussion in France, in the Sorbonne, and there was always a crazy guy at the end of the lecture who said, yeah, but what do you do with the Palestinian cause? And Bernard-Henri Lévy was so funny with his big hat and his dress, and he said, come on, please, the Palestinian, you tell me, I invented them when I was an extreme leftist, when I was a Maoist. So this man became the most devoted man of study in Jerusalem and so on. He was the opposite of an Orthodox. He was the contrary. There was no, as the Talmud says, he never, even if he had always the same hat and the same redingote, he never wore garments which had been already worn by somebody else, which is the true formula for a genuine Jewish experience. So this idea of orthodoxy is a crazy idea, a lazy idea, entertained and created by those who don't like Judaism and don't understand anything to it, and are not embodied by the Ahabat Israel, which is the love of the Jewish people and of the Jewishness. On the other side, you have some secular Jews whom I would call Orthodox. The secular Jews who repeat, I would not make politics here, but who repeat the same mottos, the same secular mottos as a sort of a meal of prayer. They are in a way Orthodox, and they are more Orthodox than my friend Bernard-Henri Lévy. So the real dividing line is not this one. The real dividing line is between those who believe that Judaism is a test, is an adventure of the spirit, is a metaphysical journey, and those who believe in the comfort of being a Jew. To be a Jew is not comfortable. Since the first day at the foot of the Sinai, when Moses came to all the little Jews of this time, Moses knew that the law had been proposed to all the nations of the earth. He knew the secret. He knew that the deal, as we say now in America, as some say today in America, the deal had been proposed to all the nations, that all of them refused. And he proposed it in despair, of course, to the poor little Jewish people who accepted the burden, who accepted to do and to hear, and then to hear. They knew, Moses knew, the Jews knew, the companion of Moses knew, except Korah and his mates, who believed that it was easy. They knew that to be a Jew is not an easy task, that to be a Jew is not a comfortable state. They knew that it is not even a state. You are not a Jew. I'm sorry, Rabbi, but you are not a Jew 65 days of the year, all the years of your life, and all the moments of your day. There is a moments where you are more Jews than others. To be a Jew is not just is not a grace who fall on your head and which you just have to entertain as a sort of spiritual capital. It's much more uneasy than that. And there is, to name for the last time, my master Emmanuel Levinas, his most famous book, which is the best introduction to his work, is called Difficult Liberty. He could have called it, he could have entitled it, Difficult Judaism. Difficult Judaism.
One of the difficulties of being a Jew is asking a concise question. So I will help you, because if you're not concise, I will cut you off. I do this largely because this isn't my synagogue, and therefore, at the end of the night, I'll be going back to my place and escaping any opprobrium for cutting you off. But Larry, go ahead. Why don't we begin, and please be concise.
Very concise. Bernard-Henri, I had the pleasure of introducing you at the Herzliya Conference on behalf of the European Leadership Network a few months ago. You also say that anti-Zionism is today's anti-Semitism. We had the meeting today in Paris, which you probably found the conclusions of. It turns out that the Brits said no. I'm wondering if, in your view, pro-Israel work in Europe is worthwhile, and should we keep trying, keep at it, because Israel has its hands full?
Is pro-Israel work in Europe productive, and can we make progress?
No, it's not a difficult question. I don't believe that all anti-Zionists are anti-Semites. I believe that there is no, I demonstrate that there is no other way of being anti-Semite today than being anti-Zionist. There is no other way. And again, it is not a creed, it is not a political claim, it is a demonstration. There is in this book the demonstration that if your neighbor wants to be an anti-Semite, he has no choice. He has to be anti-Zionist. And if he wants to recruit a big number of followers, he has to be even BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions. He has to do that. Right. It's the only way. My relationship to Israel, I am a liberal pro-Israel. I love Israel not for religious, or not only for religious reasons, not only for national reasons, not only for reasons of memory. I love Israel because I think that on very precise topics, Israel is a model for democracies, not in the area, as the Mill of Priors says, the only democracy in there. No, in the world. I believe, for example, that in the way of dealing with ethnicity, in the way of dealing with democracy, with the minorities, in the way of building a democracy without sometimes any democratic tradition, which was the case for so many Jews who arrived harassed, despaired from Arab countries or from Russia, and we invented a democracy. There is in Israel a paradigm, a pattern, an example of democracy. This is one of the main reasons why I love Israel. And this is one of the things which, at least in my country, I try to say and to recall as often as I can. Am I heard enough? Certainly not. Certainly not. And there is in France, but all over the world, also in America, an attempt which sometimes achieves its goals of delegitimizing Israel, of satanizing Israel, of denying this democratic genius of Israel, which is, of course, a source of sorrow for me, and I'm sure for you, and of despair. This conference in Paris, I don't avoid the question. I'm very sad of it. It was a mistake, as the UN resolution on the 23rd of December. If I'm faithful to what I say in my book about Israel, I must say that this UN resolution and this meeting in Paris today, and I say that, I say it publicly in France, be sure, was and are and is the wrong place, the wrong moment, and the wrong wording.
Three more.
You know, I'm going to invite you just to continue on a little bit. Maybe I'll direct your thinking or your answer a little bit toward what is the future of Judaism in Europe, particularly France and maybe in Western Europe in general. We hear a lot of difficult things about what's happening with Jews in Europe. Now we know a lot of French Jews are making Aliyah. What do you think?
As you might have noticed, I am a fighter. A fighter very seldom or has great difficulty to leave, to quit the battlefield. And I think that most of the Jews I know in France are such fighters. They know that they made France. They know that France is theirs. They know that they are among the best architects of the constituency of France and of the spirit of France. And most of them will certainly not be the first one to leave. Before them, the anti-Semites will leave. If someone has to leave France today, or Europe, it is, whoever they are, the anti-Semites, not the Jews. These guys with short ideas, with illiterate thinking, which know nothing, which don't even know why they hate Jews. This was so striking in the terrorist attacks since Toulouse to Hypercacher. When you hear the jihadists, it is a sort of reflex Pavlovian anti-Semitism. They don't even know why. They don't know why. They don't even know what is Judaism. They are just nuts. They are just stupid. How would I leave the country which my father defended with at the risk of his blood, which my ancestors, in a way, not exactly mine, but okay, ancestor of the Jews, built as a great French Republic? How would I leave this country and leave them on the battlefield? Impossible. So, the future of the Jews in Europe, I'm sorry to tell you that. I know that the American press does not say that, but I feel it and I think I'm right. Is maybe difficult, but it is not a despaired future at all, and it may even be a brilliant one. I think that the future of the Jews in France has to be brilliant. They made France again. They made the French literature. They made the French social contract. They made. I demonstrate in this book that the very stemming cell, not stems, stemming cell, the first draft of the French language, the language which I speak a little better than English, the French language, the first one who have produced, put into motion this French language is the greatest Jew of his time and maybe of all time, who is Rashi. Rashi, you will find, it will be too long here, you will find, if you want, the demonstration in this book. Rashi is the inventor of the French language. So how would the followers of Rashi leave France? Except if they think that their destiny is in Israel. Except if, as a lot do, as I might do at a point of my life, except if they believe that their next project is to add something, to contribute to the great dream made reality of Zionism. But this is another story. I believe, and I demonstrate again, that Zionism is still alive. That Zionism is not, as it is often said, out of breath. I don't believe that at all. And I completely understand a Jew who thinks that his task is to contribute to that, but to live by defeat, to live and living there the anti-Semite, certainly not.
Rabbi?
So this is a comment, not a question, but I take to heart what you said about the unthinking Jew. And I have to apologize because when I made my thank yous, I did not thank the person who brought Bernard-Henri Lévy to Wilshire Boulevard Temple, and who, without her, he would not be sitting on the bima just thrilling us with his intellect. And I would like to publicly thank Linda Kent for making this happen.
This is concise, but important.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Linda.
Mr. Levy, thank you very much for pointing out the 70 faces. I've been a passionate interfaith activist for almost 30 years, and I feel that that is my responsibility as a Jew, and I don't think that I could be a Jew unless I was concerned about the other 70 faces. You've just put it so beautifully. Here's my question. In these many years that I've been working together with people from many different faiths, one of the stereotypes that has come up often about Jews from non-Jews is that we hold ourselves morally superior to other people. That we say, look and see how we behave, and then you'll know how to behave. I've heard that a number of times when people have been totally honest about how they feel about Jews, even though they may recognize that those same Jews they're talking about are the ones that gave them their first job.
All right,
and
that's
loaned
a
them
separate.
money.
Okay, so the
All right,
question is.
So the question is, the name of your book is The Genius of Judaism.
Are you asking, do we have a superiority complex?
Is there? It's written by a Jew,
Right.
as opposed to.
So is there a sense in which Jews speak too well of themselves, basically, and is writing a book called The Genius of Judaism feeding into that stereotype?
You have probably some Jews who are inhabited by a superiority complex because you have stupid people everywhere. But few things are more remote from the genius of Judaism than this superiority complex. I quoted very quickly before a name, which is familiar to all of you, and which is the proof of that, which is the name of Korah. Korah, in the Exodus, who is the cousin of Moses, who, taking advantage of one of the numerous journeys of Moses at the top of the mountain, decides that the time has come, that the Jews are a superior people here and now, that the nation is saint as itself. And he gathers around him 250 followers, Jews, who accept, who buy the idea that to be a Jew means that immediately you are a saint people. You have an aura of sanctity. You are the best of the best. You are the salt of the earth. You are saint. And they wait for Moses to tell him, we are fed up with your complexity, we are fed up with your promises, and so on, and your difficult law. It's over. We are the best. We are superior. We are a saint nation. We are proud of this sanctity of the nation. You know what happens? Moses asks for a miracle. This miracle is the biggest miracle possible, which is a new Genesis, a new beginning, opening of the earth, transformed into a sort of big mouth, which swallows Korah and his 250 followers. The commentators of the Talmud wonder why Moses was so severe against his first cousin. Why Moses, who makes so, since 40 years, 80 years, makes so many compromises, so many deals, why he suddenly he's so sharp and so brutal? Maybe there was a compromise possible with Korah. the commentators of the Talmud, others wonder why he took the hugest risk, which is to ask for a miracle, which is the most difficult, biggest risk for a Jew. And the conclusion is that the mistake of Korah was the worst, was the biggest one. This sense of superiority was the most heavy possible fault for a Jew, and for this fault, there was nothing else than this exemplary punishment, this absolute punishment. No compromise with that. So, from the very start, from the words of Moses, this idea of a superiority of the Jewish people is a crazy idea, is a sin, is an offense, is a blasphemy, is an outrage to the Jewish message. And we all have to be faithful to that first word each time that we are tempted by this evilish idea of a possible superiority. We have to remind of Korah and Moses.
This is the most difficult thing I'm going to say tonight, but this has to be the last question. So forgive me for those of you who did not get a chance to ask, and forgive me everybody who wants to sit for more hours, as we all do, I think, and listen.
I'll make my question very, so almost all of us, or most of us, have lived all our life in the presence of Israel. And I want you to tell us how you think Israel defines the Jewish character. Because when I think when the Old Testament, the destruction of the Second Temple, when we go on exile, we were defined by, like St. Augustine said, will be the witness of the success of Christianity. So how Israel defines the character of the Jew today?
How does Israel define our Jewish character?
There is I would try to be short. Metaphysically and politically. Metaphysically, the creation of Israel is probably one of the biggest tests which was given to the Jewish people. At the end of the day, the Jews owe their survival, their genius, what they brought to the other people, to a non-political relationship to the world, to all these habit of commentary which we commented a lot since the beginning of this evening. There is in the Jewish tradition a distrust against the political temptation. You know how the gods of Israel are always unwilling gods. The kings of Israel are always unwilling kings. They are kings which have to be fetched by force in a place where they are hiding. And when they become kings, they are so different from the Greek kings, for example, who are supposed to be pure and immaculate and exemplaries. The kings of Israel are great kings, but the greatest kings are full of mistakes and sins. You know all of that. There is a sort of fragility of the idea of sovereignty in the Jewish tradition. So a very complicated relationship to politics. I tried to develop this also in the book, the difficult experience of sovereignty in the Jewish history. So in front of that, the experience of Israel, the creation of Israel, is something very, it makes a real difference. It's a huge event. It's a break in the history of the real Israel, of the whole Israel, of the history of the Jewish people. So it's a metaphysical test. Israel has to be at the height, to be worth of this Jewish heritage. which for the moment it is. I am among those who believe that Israel has been at the level of this great hope and dream and experience of the Jews. But it is a test. The other thing which I would add, which is not metaphysical but political. Politically, I believe that Israel makes every Jew in the world stronger. For me, this idea of strength is very important. I know a lot, I don't remember, but I know a lot about these generations of Jews of the time of Sartre. They were not strong. They were weak. They were not happy to be weak, of course, but they felt compelled to be weak. They felt that to be weak, at least outside, was a sort of obligation and of duty. And one of the new things of the Jewish life in the last 50 years, especially in America, but it came also to Europe, is a break with this idea of weakness. A break with this idea that to be a Jew meant to be a Jew in the shadow. This idea of a shadowy Jew. This neo-Maranism. Maranism is not only Portugal and Spain of the 15th and 16th century. The 30s in France and in America was the moment of a great Maranism. Jews were Jews inside, in secret, but openly, nearly nothing. So the modernity, this is one of the great things of modernity, consists in having broken with this tradition of self-shame, of self-hatred, and of self-inflicted weakness. There is many reasons for that, for this revolution in the Jewish being, in the Jewish behavior. Many reasons. There is some literary reasons. In France, I said yesterday in another place that there is one great writer who is called Albert Cohen, who gave to all the Jews of my generation this pride of themselves. Albert Cohen fabricated the first literary hero who had a body, who had a handsome body, and who had a free body. This was a revolution in Europe. This idea of a Jew breaking with the tradition of the unbodily Jews, without bodiless, the bodiless Jew, slave Jew, and ugly Jew, the French literature is that. Before Albert Cohen, all Jews of French literature, except in Chateaubriand, by the way, it is the only exception, are ugly, bodiless, and slave. So there is some literary reasons which made the Jew break with this tradition of self-hatred. There is some philosophical reasons. Return to study, assumption of this idea that Judaism is not only Torah but Talmud, and that we have to be proud of Talmud. This is a new idea also for the secular Jews to know that they have to deal with Talmud, and that maybe the most vertiginous Jewish experience is the relation to Talmud. But there is a third reason, third explanation of this new force of the Jews, this new strength, which is the birth of the state of Israel. And I pretend, again, I don't pretend, I demonstrate that there is no one Jew today, even those of the Jews who refuse to define themselves as Jews, even the Jews who are reluctant to see the state of Israel to speak in their name, even the Jews who make so many efforts to show a white hand and not committed with Israel, even them, there is no one Jew who does not owe a part of his force, a part of his way of standing on his feet straight and strong on earth who does not owe a part of that to the very existence of Israel. I developed that. I demonstrated. It created some anger in some Jewish circles in France, but I think it is true, and for this we all have to thank Israel.
Thank you.
Before we conclude, remember that Bernard-Henri Lévy will be signing books. We want to thank Wilshire Boulevard Temple. Rabbi Vanis is going to thank, and I want to thank Rabbi Leader, and also say how wonderful it is to have the Genius of Judaism illustrated by the genius of our guest. Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi David Wolpe. Thank you, Bernard-Henri Lévy. Please allow Bernard-Henri Lévy to get into the foyer where books will be on sale, and he will be happy to sign a book. I'll see you.